Hello, welcome to today's watercolor tutorial. In today's tutorial, we're going to be painting a landscape. This landscape is a mountain scene with some different kinds of trees and a river running through it. So we'll be able to learn some different brush techniques that will help you to paint all of these different types of subjects. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that you want to do, you have a reference that you're working from, and then draw the most important lines on your paper. Notice that I haven't drawn every tree. I've just kind of given the impression of where the trees are going to go. Then always remember that when you're painting landscapes or anything else, you're going to want to focus back to front so that you can build up your layers on top of each other without any gaps. The thing that's the farthest back always is the sky. And this is kind of a gray, stormy looking sky. So I'm just going to use the edge of my flat brush and sort of circle in some shapes that could look like clouds. I've taped off the edges of my paper so that when I peel it up, I'll have a natural looking frame and I can see how it looks with a white border. It also has the tendency to keep the paint nice and clean. But see how I'm painting what I see on the reference here, not being too fussy. And then over the top, I use a brush that's damp, not sopping wet, but damp. I don't want there to be a gap between the sky and the mountains. I want it to look like the mountains are on top of a sky. So I'm going to go right over the top of these mountains with some cloud and sky shapes and colors. Make sure that I have enough going on that it's going to layer over the top nicely at that point. So in other words, paint your sky all the way down and over the tops of the mountains. I'm letting several colors mix on the page. These are actually reds and blues to make some purples. I've got grays and blues and purples all mixing together, and that's going to help my sky to look very interesting. Once that's down, I'm going to let it dry completely before I come back and start adding the mountain range on top. Now that sky is completely dry, so we can go in and start adding some details to the mountain tops. I'm going to use a large flat and color test before I start applying that purple. That looks good. And then I'm going to go carefully around the outer edge, just using the tip of the brush like this, and add the darkest edges of the mountains. Just like this. Go fairly quickly. And then you can shift to the side of the brush and just drag it and let some of those scumbled snowtop ridges form themselves. You just have to be a little bit brave. Don't be afraid that it's not going to look right. All you need is that it looks interesting, and if you go about and try to deliberately paint every single one of those snowy ridges, it's not going to look interesting. It's going to look overworked. So far better to do it this way so that you get some of that natural energy of the mountains. Don't be afraid of contrasts. Once you have something down, go back in with a darker version of it and add that on top. It's the contrasts that make the painting interesting. So before it can dry, see I'm going back in and I'm adding some of these little scumbling tips. Once you have an initial pass of this texture in the mountains, you might want to go back with a round and add a little bit more detail and small shapes to the edges of these mountain tops. So sometimes, because you have to work so fast in that initial pass, some of these little places get left behind or left out. So I can go back with a small, something that has a good sharp tip to it so that you can really get in and get those details down. So I can go over what I already have, and then before that has a chance to dry and look like an outline, get your brush wet and scumble down a little bit so that it blends into the rest of the painting more. And I'm going to add a little bit more detail to this mountain to divide it from the farther back mountains, because I also see these lines of valleys that help show you how the mountains were formed by the water trickling down, the direction of the water that has carved out these different valleys. And while you do this, you can also